Well, hey there. Have you ever wanted to go on a fast-paced demon killing spree where you can mostly turn your brain off and mow through hordes of enemies in sometimes open or sometimes linear zones? Then boy do I have the game for you. Doom: The Dark Ages is weirdly more simple yet more complicated than the previous games. Let me explain. First off, I want to say there will be no spoilers of the story or combat past about the halfway point of the game, since it is still relatively new and others have more than likely not had time to complete it yet. I want to keep spoilers out of the conversation. Moving on though, as everyone has talked about, you have a shield now, and be mindful that you're going to need to use this all the time, whether you want to or not, because if you don't, you will just die. Most of the combat encounters now have enemies who, instead of just running you down or have a unique mechanic to them, they'll sit back and just throw a different type of projectile that you need to parry in a slightly different way than the other enemies. Cool, right? Yeah, not really. As you can see from the runtime of this video, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter one from me. I want this review to be a bit more of a conversation to be had about the best and worst points of Doom TDD, as some of my friends are calling it, and I hate acronyms by the way, but let's run with it. A good portion of this game is spent trying to give you some sort of plot device that allows you to remain engaged in the story, yet the plot is just happening to you and around you, but with little of your own involvement. Weirdly enough, they treat the Slayer, or as we all know him as, the Doom guy, as a moving atomic bomb for the most part, where they send him down if they need a giant horde of enemies, structures, and all to be razed to the ground. There are some sort of important characters here that again don't really do a ton other than just talk and interact with each other to move the plot forward within, again, their own way, with almost no involvement from the Slayer. The most involvement that you do have as a character in this world is just killing the things in front of you, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it allows the people in charge to just do their own thing, and in the later half of the game, they do some more interesting things here and there, but it's still nothing that really grabbed me. Doom has never been the most interesting for dialogue or story reasons, and it's gonna remain basically the same here. Graphics are pretty fantastic overall though, with everything having a nice sheen or glow to it. Enemies still explode with guts and limbs flying everywhere. Weapons and projectiles are still highly detailed, along with environments being some of the best in the series. Now, the first half of the game was mostly boring with the environments. Some of those environments we've seen time and time again, with similar interiors, similar exteriors, all with the same colors and stylings of previous games, with just a little bit less red and a little more medieval. But after you reach the halfway point, these environment artists fucking cooked. If you stand still in any zones and look out into the horizon, you'll notice something massive in the distance, and it gives some unique world building to the zone that you're currently in. With different colors and designs as the game continues, it actually starts to become pretty gorgeous. So if you can make it past the muddy and mostly red parts of the first half of the game, you're in for a bit of a treat in the later half. Previous Dooms were also top of the line graphically, and I feel that they toned it back a little bit with this one. My PS4 was practically melting when I was playing Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, yet my 3070 in my PC wasn't making a peep. It was just chugging right along, keeping at 60 to 80 frames at 1440p. I did have to tweak my settings a little bit to achieve this, but overall it ran well. It just maybe wasn't as detailed as I remember the previous games being. This leads into the next bit that I've heard other reviewers and content creators speak about, and that's the glory kills. They are mostly gone here, which is a little bit disappointing. When an enemy is glowing purple for an execution, you do a simple kick or a punch to kill them. And that's about it. Very rarely would I get a special kill scene that shows me ripping someone in half or taking their spinal cord out. There are elite enemies in the game that you get upgrades from, and whenever you defeat them, you rip their hearts out, but they are practically the same every time. You just reach into their chest, rip their heart out, and smash it, it gives you the upgrade, and you move on to the next one. with the conversation centered around enemies right now, and as I alluded to before, the enemy patterns and attacks are so basic that it started to get boring near the end of the game. I was playing on Ultra Violence, which is considered the basic hard difficulty, and yes, I did really have to pay attention to my health and shields on occasion, but normally this wasn't really much of a worry. Most of the time I was worried about the smaller guys just peppering me down with their little guns compared to the bigger guys. I'd be focused on the larger enemies, and those little ones would just whittle down my HP to pretty much nothing. And you can't block and attack at the same time, so whether you're going up against smaller or larger enemies, they all fall back doing the same 2 or 3 attacks, where you can either block, parry, or run away from them, forcing you to play more of a waiting game to engage with them, because if you don't focus on their attacks first, they will hit you rather quickly and drain your health. But as long as you're utilizing the very, and I mean very, generous parry window, then you're good. Like seriously though, this parry window is kinda nuts, and it will parry anything within 360 degrees of the Slayer. There aren't many new enemy types, and only slightly retooled older ones. Any new enemies that are brought before you though, they of course start off as a boss, and then they're placed into the normal groupings of enemies that you face as you progress the game. I found it getting a little stale by the end of it, and you do actually use your shield in combat, but it can be used more for puzzles periodically as well. Extremely basic puzzles that I solved within seconds after looking at them. There are some side areas in the game that have you picking up toys and upgrade materials, other random collectibles, but have slightly more difficult puzzles. But never did one stump me for more than about 10 seconds. The solution was always right in front of me or around the next corner, making me feel less rewarded and more annoyed about these. I stopped doing them as I got further into the game, since I'm for one not really a person who goes around getting all the collectibles. But also the upgrade materials became so abundant that I had excessive amounts of them. I upgraded every weapon that I was using, and I had no reason to further seek out gold, rubies, or wraith stones. And for the progression of this game, it kind of goes with those currencies to a degree where, again, they are very abundant. So you're not really going out of your way to look for them because they're kind of strewn across your path along the way. And then because you have so many of them, you don't really need to go out of your way too much at least to find them, and even if you do, they're relatively easy to get. These currencies are utilized to upgrade your weapons in order from gold to rubies to wraith stones. They are used, and the rarity of them is in this exact sequence, so you're going to use up a ton of gold, then you're going to find a few rupees, and then the wraith stones are more rare and you're going to get a lot less of those. But they are utilized at the very end of your upgrades, and at no other time are you required to even use them. So if you end up grabbing one and you're not at a point to the upgrade where you can utilize it, then it's kind of pointless and it's going to sit there until you're actually ready to use it. But you always upgrade your weapons in a very linear path. You can sort of choose between one or another upgrade, but you can flip-flop between them after you've already upgraded past that point. But how they can slightly change combat didn't really affect me at all, but an example would be that you get an upgrade for a weapon that after you shoot the enemy in front of you a little bit, you throw your shield at it and it explodes for a little bit extra damage. Well, I wasn't really just throwing my shield willy-nilly, but whenever I saw that it was glowy after I hit it a couple times, then that let me know that I could throw it to kind of pop that damage for a little bit more. But again, it didn't really change combat a lot, it just kind of gave me a little wrinkle here and there, and sometimes a lot less than that. Some of the upgrades just made it where you fired a little faster, maybe you ignited your bullets, and sometimes just gave you extra armor. The upgrades were not that meaningful, and I didn't feel like I needed to seek them out any more than I already was because, well, they didn't really change the way that I approached combat or felt about the game. They just really didn't motivate me because the significance behind searching and taking the time to do this wasn't a large payout. And the other part of progression is these elite enemies that once you kill them, you get an upgrade to your health, shields, or your ammo capacity. And again, sort of important to a degree, but it's so minimal that it doesn't really change a lot. So to me, the progression, it has it there, but it's just not meaningful in any way. So I really didn't even pay attention to it, and if I came across something, sure, I grabbed it, but I wasn't going out of my way for the most part. And as you can see here, I actually did get close to 100% on many of the levels. But as I got further into the game, I just stopped because, like I said, it wasn't necessary. Moving on to movement, the movement has been toned down in this one, compared to the frantically fast flying around that you would do in Eternal. It's not a bad change necessarily, but not one that I prefer. I enjoy how quickly I could get around the arena to dismantle my foes however I saw fit. And in Eternal, you had a bit more limited ammo that you had to utilize. I never found myself running out of ammo in the Dark Ages, but maybe for a singular weapon I'd run out for about 10 seconds. Then I would move on to kill an enemy and it'd be instantly replenished. Or there would be a pickup on the ground right next to me, including most ammo types. And even if that weren't the case, once I cleared a room, there would be more massive amounts of ammo waiting for me as I moved on to the next zone. And again, as a reminder, you don't have a dash or a double jump. Hell, you barely have a jump. The only thing related to speed here is a shield bash, where you can dash a pretty good distance to an enemy and give them a good old smack with your shield. You have a sprint that has you run slightly faster than your normal movement speed, but otherwise doesn't carry the momentum through combat. Since there are larger zones within this game with ledges that you simply can't reach because of your tiny little jump, and there is no mantling over a wall, and that sort of felt bad. But sprinting around and ramming into a foe with a shield did change a bit of the negative feelings I had with these changes to the movement, but it is more grounded and basic, making it feel a bit slower, which I didn't necessarily dislike or hate. I just prefer the faster pace of the previous games. There are also these levels that I consider on rails, because can you move around them freely? Kind of. Do you really want to or need to? Not really. Do you have a very specific objective when flying around on a dragon or piloting a giant mecha suit? Yes. Is there a reason to do anything other than complete that objective? No. Although not on rails specifically, both of these might as well be. Sticking with a very similar formula of the combat where you shoot a little, dodge a little, and keep repeating this until the enemy in front of you is turned into a giant pile of blood and guts. And that's all there is. They change up the pacing of combat a little bit. They're also an interesting idea, but it's just not well implemented, and it feels more like an afterthought with very little unique gameplay to showcase, and these would have been a perfect time to be able to try something new and wholly unique. But they stuck with the same formula. Instead of running around on a mostly linear zone, you fly or pilot a mech instead. A small note for music here before we get on to the ending: it's basically non-existent. It's extremely low for most of the game where you can't even hear it, and with it being basic and not bombastic, unlike the songs that we got in the previous game. Shout out to Mick Gordon, who made those games sound fantastic. He is not here for this one, and boy does it show. Also, as a note here, all of the music that you're hearing in the background is from Eternal, because I love that soundtrack and it's fucking amazing. The sounds of everything else are just fine, from the crunches of enemy bones, splattering of blood and guts, to the stomps of the Slayer. These sounds fill every combat sequence with a satisfying punch, and it would just feel a bit more complete if I just had some metal screeching at me in the background for those intense moments, or even during some of the boss fights. The guns also don't sound as meaty as they used to, or pack as much of a bang or pow as they did in the previous games. Voice acting, again with the very little amount of cutscenes here, which is totally fine by the way, I'm not here to watch a movie, they sounded mostly fine. Each character sounds as if they should belong here, no glaring issues, and none of the characters really stood out in a good or bad way. Otherwise, the audio is serviceable across the board. And the last thing I want to talk about here is going to be the difficulty. As I've mentioned throughout the majority of this, it's rather easy. Even on the harder difficulty, could I have cranked it higher? Yeah, sure. But I'm the type of person who likes a combat that gives me a challenge to master how to engage my foes or utilize my entire arsenal to the best of my ability. Not one that just has higher damage and health numbers while staring at my screen that just had big green glowy parryable attacks. It wasn't engaging enough to warrant a difficulty boost, and with the slower combat, the abundance of ammo, the enemies staying mostly at range, and shooting these slow projectiles at you, there weren't many times that I felt I was in danger. Now, the real question is, did I die a good bit? The answer is, you fucking bet I did. But it was mostly because I was attempting to try a different method of combat, going more on the offensive rather than the reactive defensive. I would die anytime that I didn't just stare at the green glowy attacks, and that felt bad. I wish that I could have engaged the enemies on my own accord, rather than being required to utilize this shield in a way that the developers are forcing me to. And another small thing that I forgot to mention previously is the different weapon types. So of course you have 2 different shotguns, 2 different energy weapons, 2 different skull crushing weapons. Yeah. But either way, you can hot swap between these 2 different types utilizing the same ammo, depending on your preference for that combat situation. Me personally, I just picked one and stuck with it for the most part. And then the UI in the game isn't anything fantastic. The map in the game is actually really fucking good. The rest of the UI elements, they serve their purpose, but the map tells you exactly where you need to go, how to get there, and it's pretty clean for the most part. It tells you where you can get back to your main objective and where the hidden areas within the map are. It kind of tells you a little bit too much sometimes, but I don't hate it. And that's going to be it for the difficulty, and a very minor note that I want to add for technical issues. I basically had none throughout my entire game. I did have 2 crashes randomly. Nothing crazy otherwise occurred though. I didn't experience any bugs or other issues outside of the 2 crashes. And that about brings it to the end for us to wrap this up, where my thoughts and feelings on Doom: The Dark Ages is that it gives you more options and abilities to combat your foes than ever before, and I'm glad the developer id made some changes and isn't sticking with the same formula. They're always shaking it up and trying something new. Sometimes trying new things doesn't quite stick the landing though. By no means does that make this a bad game. I feel it's a very minor step backwards, and I hope they take a lot of the ideas put forth in this one and make something truly amazing with the next one. Also, if you want to hear some other great takes and conversations about this game, some other videos that I really enjoyed is the one from GameSpot by Kurt Indivina and the Second Wind video by James Reed. I'll put links to both of these in the description, and to close out the video, I enjoyed my time playing this game. Was I getting a little bit bored by the end of it though? Sure. Do I wish it was a little bit better? Also sure. But did I truly want to stop playing it at any point? No, not at all. I always enjoy running around, smashing demons, and watching the Slayer continue on his next adventure. I say grab this game on Game Pass like I did, or wait for a bit of a discount. Not only because the cost of games is getting insane, but also I beat this within about 15 hours, and I couldn't suggest that full price for what I played. Either way, that is going to be it for me, and hope you enjoyed the review. As always, like, subscribe, all that dumb YouTube stuff, and I'll see you next time.